I'm Jama Best, the Executive Director of the Arkansas Humanities Council. And, we're always looking to find new and innovative ways that we can provide programming that we hear. We hear from our constituents, from our grantees, applicants, and so forth, of things that they would like to see us sponsor or do. And so today's Fundraising Friday is one of those examples. And I am so excited and pleased to be able to introduce to you Mary Ellen Kubit, who's going to give our presentation today. And I have no doubt you guys are going to enjoy her presentation. And I cannot wait to hear the program. So let me give you a little introduction about Mary Ellen. For the last 25 years, Mary Ellen has worked in the nonprofit fundraising profession, for small one-person shops to supervising a large staff of 30 fundraising employees. She was trained in the University of Pittsburgh's billion-dollar campaign effort, where she worked on the $250 million School of Medicine campaign, and later led the $8 million effort for the School of Education. She went on to lead fundraising at the University of Texas at El Paso, overseeing an $18 million a year program. Her consulting practice helps nonprofits in Arkansas and nationwide. She's an advocate also for the prevention and recovery of domestic violence and for the unsheltered community in Central Arkansas. Over the years, she's written over 1,000 grants and currently teaches at the University of Central Arkansas in the School of Communication, and teaches fundraising and grant writing for students in the UA Little Rock Public Administrative Master's Program in the Clinton School of Public Service. So with that, I would like to introduce to you Mary Ellen Kubit, who is a wonderful friend of the council's and mine. And Mary Ellen, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited about this, and I'm going to share my presentation. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so today this is our first Fundraising Friday, our first in our series of 8. So today we're just going to do an overall kind of boot camp on what is fundraising and what some of the key terminology. And then our follow-up sessions are each going to take a deep dive into one of the key areas that we talk about today. So our goals today are just to learn the basics and learn the basic fundraising terminology. And now some of you may be very experienced fundraisers in this crowd. I know a few of you are, but for some of us who are new, we're just going to cover some of those key terms and some of the key terminology that's used in professional fundraising programs. And I know we're going to go a little fast today, but don't worry, because you're going to have copies of those slides and copies of the handouts, and then this as a video resource to come back to at any time. I'm going to try and leave at least 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A at the end of our talk. And I think if you can take at least 2 or 3 big takeaways from today's session, that's a success. So maybe just keep thinking about what might be a 1 or 2 or 3 of these big takeaways that will help you. And of course, I want to encourage everyone just to relax. As I jokingly say, you can't spell fundraising without fun. So, we want to just have a relaxed full session and know that, again, this is the big overview, the big umbrella, and then each of our remaining sessions, we're going to take a deep dive into one of these key components. So my first question, right, we can, in chat, here we go. I'm going to pull up my chat so everyone can see. How much do we think was given away in 2022 in our country last year? Does anybody know? Let me pull up the chat. It's not going to let me. Okay. Oh, here we go. I can't pull it up. Okay. Does anybody know? Can anyone take a stab in chat real quick? How much was given away given to charity in 2022? Someone give me a stab. Oh, that's a good one. 5 billion, 30 million. Excellent. Do we have one more? One more guess? Yeah, 2.5 billion. Are you guys ready? Because this is going to be surprising. $499 billion. Almost $5 billion was given away in the United States only in 2022. Now, even though this was down 3%, because the last 2 years, right, 2020 and 2021, during the pandemic showed an increase in giving. So this is down 3%, but still, think about that, $500 billion. That's huge. It's mind-blowing for many people to realize it was that much. So where did this money go to, right? Where did this money, we're going to talk about quickly, where did this money go to and who gave it? So if you notice on the slide, 64% of that money, $319 billion, was given by people. That surprises some people new to the nonprofit world. We have a tendency to think when we're new to the nonprofit world, new to fundraising, that, I'm going to get most of my money from foundations and businesses and corporations. But in the end, people give away more money than any other group. So if you look at it, if you even combine the individual giving, and here, let me see if I can pull up my little pointer here. There, oh, look at that. Okay, so if you combine giving by individuals and then giving by bequests, these two together total 73% of all giving of that almost $500 billion a year. And then you can look at giving by foundations is a little over 100 billion, and given by corporations, a little over $21 billion. So just keep in mind this breakdown of which different groups are giving money to charities. Where is this money going? Most of it is going to religious organizations. Then the second most is human services organizations, which many of us fit into. And then the third, education. The fourth is foundations, and we'll talk a little bit about what are foundations, but these are people giving money to set up an independent foundation that then works to give money away. After that comes health, public society benefit, international programs, arts, culture, humanities. So you can see if you're an arts and culture organization, it's a little tougher, right? Not as many people are giving to arts and cultures and humanities organizations. And then we have environment and animals. Kind of strange they clump those two types of nonprofits together, but they do. And then scholarships and programs directly to individuals is the last 2% money goes to individuals. So if you think about kind of the nonprofit organizations in our country, there are 1.8 million nonprofit organizations in the US. Right? Many are religious organizations, many are schools and educational institutions. And then the other biggest constituency is the grant making group, the foundations and the corporate foundations, right? So we have a lot of competition out there nationwide. So what I want everyone to remember, though, is the truth about fundraising is it is actually big business. Nonprofits are big business in our nation. In fact, nonprofits contribute, right, this 1.8, look at the trillions of dollars that nonprofits, of the 1.8 million nonprofits, we contribute basically $3.7 trillion to annual revenue in the country. That's huge, right? The nonprofit world is a huge part of the US aggregate annual revenue. Just some things to keep in mind. Now, okay, the truth about Arkansas fundraising is of that roughly 1.8 million nonprofit organizations, there are 12,000 registered nonprofits in just Arkansas. So this is the hard truth of fundraising here in our state. We have 12,000 organizations, but there are a finite number of donors, philanthropists, and charitable dollars in our state. So that is, right, putting extra pressure on us as nonprofits to become more skilled at appealing for those dollars. So in general, one big takeaway, what are the four sources of money? What are the four pots of money? We can raise money from people. We can raise money from businesses and corporations. We can raise money from foundations. And then we can apply for federal and state grants. Those are the four main ways nonprofits, right? Those four revenue streams, those four sources. So keep that in mind too. So with individuals, my first boss, 25 years ago, Trisha Ranges, who was in charge of the annual fund at the University of Pittsburgh, said people give for three reasons. And I have found over the 25 years this to be absolutely true. People give because they have it in their hearts, right? They have it in their pocketbooks. They have the resources to give. And then here's the key, they are asked. And you need all three of these things. As you can see here, my little equal sign, my little fundraising equation, you need all three of these things to bring in resources. So again, people have it in their hearts. They care about your mission and the good work your nonprofit does. Two, they have the resources to give. Three, the key component, our job sometimes as fundraisers or as nonprofit leaders, they are asked, and then that results in money to the organization. So that formula is also one of my big takeaways. I've always found that to be true. So what I want us to do, since this is our intro class and we're talking about big picture umbrella ideas today, I just want to go over different components of a professional fundraising program for large nonprofits. Not that we can do all of this as a small nonprofit, but for large nonprofits, just so we know how all the moving pieces can fit together. I want us to imagine that. And then I want us to start thinking about, of all of those, what can we do for a small organization or a small shop? And by small organization, I'm going to think an organization that has under $1 million of annual expenses or revenue, right? $1 million and under. You can be as small as 10,000 annual revenue. That's okay. That's a small shop, or really under $1 million. And I'm going to also say maybe a fundraising staff of 0 to 2, maybe 3 at the most. That's what I'm considering a small shop. So let's start by diving in and talking about annual giving and what is annual giving. Annual giving is typically gifts that are given once a year or renewed once a year, usually through things we're all familiar with, those fundraising letters we get in the mail, the social media fundraising posts we get, the giving via email, even things like Giving Tuesday, right? These are all asking us for a gift every year from a nonprofit. They're typically smaller, $100, $200, kind of can be as small as $10. But people are giving this gift every year. And then typically the annual fund revenue is unrestricted support for your nonprofit. So there's no strings attached. It's just, $50 to support Children's Hospital. Right? We don't say for a specific fund, it's just general, it's unrestricted. And then also nonprofits typically use annual fund money raised as part of their yearly operating budget, right? So nonprofits typically spend the annual giving money as the year goes on. It's typically spent that year. So some examples of annual giving. Here's one thing I want to point out. Notice on the slides here, I am putting in some of my favorite books for you if you want to do further reading. So just on some of these slides, I put my favorite books and the author. So if you want to get these off of Amazon or an independent bookseller, you can. So these are my 2 favorite books for annual giving. Fritz Schroeder, this is kind of considered, even though it was written in the 90s, it's still considered the annual giving Bible. So just so you know, that has a huge reputation. And then I like this donor focus strategies for annual giving. But when we think annual giving activities, I want us to think of these things: special events, direct mail, emails, direct emails, phoning. We don't quite do as much of that as we used to back in the day, but nonprofits still do a lot of phoning for annual fund gifts. You can have a leadership giving circle for your annual fund donors. So maybe annual fund donors who give you $1,000 or more a year. They might be a special type of annual fund donor, and we might call them a leadership giving circle. Of course, annual giving is done a lot over the web. Those are your donation pages. And of course, now the big way for annual giving is social media. Okay, so so we have annual giving. The next part of this fundraising avenues is major giving. So the difference between major giving and annual giving is major giving is going to be a large gift, typically 10 times an annual fund gift. So if someone's giving you $1,000, a major gift to your organization might be more like $10,000. But they give this only once in a while, and it's typically payable over 3 to 5 years. Right? So someone makes a $10,000 commitment to your nonprofit, and they say, I will give you $2,500 a year for 4 years for that $10,000. And it's typically restricted for a particular purpose. Major gifts. Maybe I'm going to fund a scholarship. Maybe I'm going to fund a special program, right? And then that money is restricted, right, by kind of U.S. law. Once it's restricted for that purpose and that purpose only. And then the key other thing to think about major giving in terms of a major giving program is that it is sometimes in non-cash assets. So here you would be thinking things like a gift through stock, maybe a gift through real estate, through life insurance, maybe a trust. So in our session on major giving, we're going to take a deep dive into all those different ways people make major gifts. These are my favorite major gift books. I love these by Laura Fredericks. This Ask book is fantastic. I love this Developing Major Gifts because what Laura Fredericks does that I love is she gives really good samples, sample letters, sample phone conversations that you can use again and again in your own fundraising. These are amazing books that help give us the confidence to ask for money, to ask for that major gift. And if you're looking at endowment building, this is a great book about endowment building. So what are major gifts for? They're typically for special programs. Again, major gifts are typically restricted. Unrestricted meaning you can spend the money as a nonprofit any way you want. Restricted meaning the donor puts restrictions on the gift, the use of that money, and we as the nonprofit must abide by that restriction. Okay? Major gifts can also do endowment building. They can do planned giving programs. Planned giving would be a special kind of major gift that is through a bequest or a trust or insurance, something that involves planning. That's why it uses that term, planned giving. It can be also used for special projects, maybe a certain research project. It could be used for renovation of a facility. A major gift can also be used for capital construction. Okay, so next in our, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. Next in our different types of fundraising, we have corporate and foundation fundraising. Now I started with individual gifts because if you remember, individual gifts gave 73% of the money that was given last year. So that's why we started with individuals. But now let's think about corporate and foundation. So by corporations, I mean, of course, local, regional, or national businesses and corporations like Arvest, like everyone can think of McDonald's or Target or the Bank of America or Verizon, right? Those are the kinds of corporations we're thinking about. And then we can think towards foundations. So what's a foundation? Because remember, we're defining this key terminology. A foundation is a nonprofit corporation or charitable trust that is registered with the IRS, and it makes grants to organizations, institutions, or individuals for charitable purposes. In fact, in order to get IRS status as a foundation, you must agree to give a certain percentage of your assets away each year. So foundations would be like the MacArthur Foundation, the Ford Foundation, here locally, the Wingate or the Rockefeller Foundation, and so forth. So those are foundations you can think of. Okay, corporate and foundation giving, they work in several ways. Corporations and foundations can give annual gifts. That is very common. And in general, with annual gifts, some corporations even match gifts from their employees. So, for example, if they work for Arvest and an Arvest employee gives $250 to your organization, it is possible that Arvest will then match that $250 to that organization. But the burden of that is on the individual donor and the nonprofit. The individual donor has to, in a sense, take paperwork or fill out paperwork in their corporate HR office. And then the matching money is sent to the nonprofit. So do remember, corporations sometimes match individual employee gifts up to a certain amount to your nonprofit. Of course, corporations and foundations have grant programs that involve submissions. Sometimes those are called RFPs, where the foundation or the corporation will put out a request for proposal, the RFP, request for proposal. And don't forget, sometimes corporations and foundations do give major gifts to nonprofits. So keep them in mind too as part of your major gift programs. Now, since we're here with the Arkansas Humanities Council, we have to celebrate governmental grants. Everyone give me a little heart. Here's my heart going across the screen. Yes, governmental grants. We can get grants from federal agencies, state agencies, and local agencies. So keep those governmental grants in mind too for your nonprofit. One thing I want to mention for nonprofits, this is a term commonly used in the fundraising nonprofit world, is when the nonprofit is ready to do a concerted effort for a large fundraising goal, we have a tendency to call that a capital campaign or a campaign. And what that means is over usually 3 to 5 years, the nonprofit creates a specific goal. It can be things for like new construction, building renovation, endowment. And we set out to raise that large amount over those 3 to 5 years. So we might say, we're going to do a $50,000 campaign to renovate this facility. So campaigns have specific strategies. So just so you know, this is kind of the 5-part structure of capital campaigns. I took this from the Donorly website, just so you know, but it reigns very, very true. So in capital campaigns, you first start off with a planning phase. In a planning phase, you're going to sometimes do a feasibility study. And a feasibility study is where you hire a consultant to independently go out and ask your stakeholders and some of your key volunteers, do they think the nonprofit is ready for this campaign? And do they think that the community will support this large effort? And sometimes even, will that person be willing to make a gift? And that is all shared in confidence with the consultant who is doing the feasibility study. Campaigns are typically comprehensive or restricted. And what that means is a comprehensive campaign over the 5 years is going to count every gift given to the organization over that 3 to 5 year period, whether it's a $5 annual fund gift or that, $25,000 major gift. It's counting all gifts. A restricted campaign in planning is going to say, we're only going to count the gifts for this campaign that go toward that renovation. So you make all of those decisions during this planning phase. Now the quiet phase occurs, right? You publicly aren't telling people you're in a large fundraising effort yet, but you've gotten positive feedback from your feasibility study, and you start quietly approaching your key donors and your stakeholders for initial commitments to this effort. Ideally, you want to raise 50 to 60% of your total. And then after you've raised 50 to 60% of your total goal, you have a kickoff, which announces publicly you're in this fundraising effort. Typically, that's done within the first year, year and a half, 2 years maybe. If you're in a 5-year campaign, you have your public kickoff. and then you are publicly raising money for the remaining period of that campaign. And then, of course, after you reach your goal, you have some sort of celebration, you have your completion event, and of course, you follow up, because there's that saying, who are your best future donors? Your current donors well cared for, which some of us know the term there is stewardship, how we care for the donors who give to us. Okay, since we are right on track, but let's move on. Okay, here we go. So of course we all know about boards. I don't have to tell you anything about boards. If you're in this meeting, we all work with boards. But one thing to think of is board members, in addition to leading, to making sure we have healthy governance, to supporting and supervising the executive director, sometimes boards are not asked as much to ensure the financial stability of an organization. So when you're thinking of board members, if you're thinking of board responsibilities, remember it is 5 pieces of this wheel. So we want to work as nonprofit leaders to ensure that our board is doing all 5 of these things, hopefully in a synergistic way. Just keep that in mind. Okay, and of course, we have volunteers, right? Volunteers can help nonprofits in so many ways. They can help us get work done. They can help us build relationships. They can help us advance our mission and be advocates for us in the community. One thing to know about volunteers is people are more likely to give to your organization once they've volunteered. So volunteers can be a huge possibility for annual fund donors and eventually for major gift donors. When we're thinking volunteers, though, one tip I want to give you, you do want to think about the volunteer's role and responsibility. So every volunteer should have a job description. Every volunteer should be trained in your organization's like key HR procedures, right? You just want to make sure that they're following all of your organizational policies and procedures, even if they are a volunteer. And of course, we mentioned that volunteers are more likely to support your organization. Now, this is a really big fundraising staff, right? I know none of us have the staff. This is an old org chart from UAMS many years ago, but I just like to bring it to people's attention because it kind of shows how pieces are moving. So if you notice this half of the UAMS organization at this point in time, this is really their frontline fundraising staff. Right? These are the people who are out there knocking on doors, right? Asking for money. Right? Just right in here, we have advancement services. We haven't talked a lot about advancement services, but that's things like processing the donations, depositing the checks, keeping that donor data information accurate and up to date. They can also do stewardship, help with the thanking and the continued involvement of previous donors. And then here UAMS has a separate, at this point, they had a separate department for special events, right? We haven't talked a lot about special events, but we will take a deep dive during our annual fund session about special events. Okay, so you just looked at that chart, but this is what I think when I'm a small nonprofit leader. Help! Because small nonprofits, we don't have this huge resource, right? Sometimes it's just you, it's just me. So if you feel like this nonprofit leader, when it's coming to your fundraising, we've all been there. Don't worry. I have some tips and strategies for you. The next few minutes, we're going to talk about strategies for the small nonprofit or the small shop, because again, you cannot do everything when you're in a small office. But the first thing I'm going to encourage you to do in a small nonprofit is keep good records, right? Your donor data is very important. It needs to be secured, protected, and exist in perpetuity, right? So if something happens, you always have donor records. I have heard from many organizations, unfortunately, over my many years of consulting here in Arkansas, that they lose all their data records. Oh, we had all the last campaign information in a binder. No one can find that binder now. So they don't know who gave to their last capital campaign 10 years ago. That's a painful moment because our best future donors Are our past donors well stewarded? And if you lose track over who you asked for money last time, that is an unfortunate position to be in. So I encourage everyone to find a low priced, even cloud solution for your donor information. One I like is TechSoup. They are their own nonprofit. They help nonprofits secure discounted technology and equipment. They have resources, a small nonprofit, really a nonprofit who's um, accepting and processing under $250,000 a year. You can get a cloud-based donor database for only about $99 a year. That is worth your long-term investment to maintain the accuracy of those donor records. My next piece of advice is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, I'm sure this gentleman is very proud of this crazy invention he put together over here, designing this back wheel. But how many years did that take him to figure out? We don't have to invent the wheel when we are small nonprofits. There are so many good resources out there online. I'm going to suggest you see what is out there, and the joke is copy and steal everything, right? Borrow ideas from other successful nonprofits. In general, as long as you're not competing, most nonprofits are very willing and eager to share processes, procedures, policies, etc. So one thing I want to encourage you to do is rethink special events. I know I get a lot of pushback on this from Arkansas nonprofits, but Arkansas nonprofits love the special event. We love, the fantasy chocolate ball and the woo at the zoo and the run and really all the big events where people wear, tuxedos and fancy dresses. We love those in Arkansas. We really do. But I'm going to encourage you as a small shop to just rethink this slightly and only do one event per year. Do one large event per year and do it well. And then I'm going to suggest you take a shift in thinking about special events. And in terms of special event being a run or a large event like at Dickey Stevens Park where you're going to have scotch tasting, right, all that stuff. For a second event, instead, I'm going to say one large event and then think about smaller, more intimate events that technically won't cost you anything. These are small, intimate events hosted by your board members, your stakeholders, and key donors, typically in their home with about 15 or 20 guests, right? People that they know. So your board member is inviting people that they know that they think might be interested in learning about you as a nonprofit. These are intimate relationship building events where you share your mission. These can impact your nonprofit in such a powerful way. So I want to challenge you to think about that. Okay. Also, no, we can do small, even though we're a small shop, we're a small nonprofit, we can do major gifts. So here's some guidelines on how to do a major gift program when there's just one of you or maybe two of you. I would say you want to have no more than 15 to 20 prospects. What's a prospect? They're a current donor of yours, a current annual fund donor of yours that has the financial potential to give more, to give possibly as much as 10 times their annual gift. You can also look at who has given to you, but who gives large gifts to other nonprofits. My husband and I jokingly say, no one loves a symphony program more than a development officer or a fundraiser, because the first thing we do is turn to the back and see who's giving at what level. It's very true. That's one way you can look at who is giving to you, but who is also giving possibly larger gifts to other organizations, or who is philanthropically involved in our community. Okay, you also want to decide what is a major gift for you. I want you just to quickly absorb that a major gift is not quick. A major gift is an 18 to 36 month process. Remember that capital campaign takes 3 to 5 years. Capital campaigns are typically completed by major gifts. Major gifts are typically going to take between 18 to 36 months of development. They typically involve 12 to 15 touches. By touches, we mean significant interactions between you and the donor. That's why we want to keep contact reports of these things in that donor database. I really do want to say, remember, major gifts always happen not on our nonprofit timeline, even though we may want them to. Major gift always happens on the donor's timeline. So just keep that in mind. And my suggestion is going to be to commit 1 day a week to major gift giving. If you can, 1 day a week to developing those relationships with those 15 people. My other advice is outsource what you can. We're not all able to have a planned giving program where we ask our donors to consider gifts through their estate, through trusts, through real estate. So we can outsource that. There are companies that do this for a reasonable amount of fees. They will create a brochure with your logo, but planned giving information. And the one I love, for example, is the Sharp Group. They've been doing this for about 20 years. They're the nation's leading resource for planned giving material for nonprofits. If possible, you can also outsource your annual fund mailing and newsletter. That's not always possible. I'm going to encourage you to continue up with I'm going to encourage you to continue your education through seminars like this, especially free ones, because research has shown that a nonprofit that supports continuing education for their fundraisers and their leadership on average raise $37,000 more a year than those who do not do continuing education. So it does help. And now I want to end with planning is key, and we're going to go over some key planning strategies for just the next few minutes. Look at these little emoji fears. Look at these emoji fears. We're afraid because poor planning produces pressure. Sometimes you feel that pressure when you're in a small nonprofit. We can avoid some of that pressure by planning. Again, the first tip, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to create your own annual plan. This is a wonderful annual plan, and I have this as one of the resources that Adrian's going to send you. This is literally called the Super Simple Fundraising Plan Template. So if your fiscal year goes from January, December, right about October, you want to be working on your annual plan for next year. Use this template for Network for Good. It is phenomenal, and it's going to help you plan. When we said, right, maybe dedicate 1 day a week to a major gift effort, look at this nonprofit worker. Look at the Zen state she's in right now, because she has divided up her week really well. Just some things to think about. You can plan out certain days of the week. You do different things. When let's say you're the only person in your organization who raises money, maybe on Monday you do the receipting from all the gifts that were given the week before. Maybe on Tuesday you focus on your big annual fund event or those small intimate events with your board members and stakeholders we've been talking about. Maybe Wednesday you do grant work. Then Thursday you turn your eye to those major gifts. And maybe Friday, you focus on communications. I love focusing on communication planning and communication work on Fridays because in general, no major gift person's going to be approached on a Friday afternoon, right? That's sometimes not the best timing. So just something to think about. Divide up your week. I have this weekly distribution handout for you, blank, so you can fill that out and you can help use that as a guide. The last planning mechanism I have is this Eisenhower matrix. Many of you have seen this before, but it has important and not important on one side of the matrix, urgent and non-urgent on the top of the matrix. So what you can do is you can chart out your to-dos each week to help, or each month, depending upon how often you want to do this, to help keep your focus and to help keep your eyes on the prize. Because what you want to notice is when it's urgent and important, you want to do that first. When it's not urgent but important, you want to schedule it. When you find something that is not important but urgent, delegate it if you can, or outsource it if you can, and then delete it. If it is not urgent and not important, delete it. Just get rid of it. Don't do it. This sometimes is hard. It's hard sometimes for development officers or fundraisers or nonprofit leaders to just say, you know what, I'm not going to do that now. But sometimes that is very helpful. So I'm going to call this the attack the week strategy. So I want everyone ready. Everyone get your claws up. Get your claws up. Ready? Because we want to attack that week. Thank you. Thank you guys for indulging me. We want to attack that strategy. We want to attack that week. And we want to make sure we're doing what is urgent, what is not urgent but important. We're delegating what we can, and we're deleting what is neither urgent nor important. We want to get rid of those. And this is how we reach the state of nonprofit zen. This nonprofit zen. And I put this up here with a little bit of humor because this is our ideal, right? Our ideal nonprofit zen. So takeaways, there's a PDF of these slides for you. There is also a copy of all those handouts, the annual plan, the attack your week strategy, and the weekly breakdown of what you can do each week. Again, of course, we all know this, but with our fundraising, we always want to stay mission-centered. We always want to keep the fun in fundraising. Remember, you can't spell fundraising without F-U-N. So we want to try and keep it lively and enjoyable, because if you enjoy it more, you're going to do it more, right? So try and keep that fun in fundraising. And of course, I'm going to suggest you join us next time. We have 7 more of these. We're going to take a deep dive into each one of those core components. So the rest of our time is just going to be for questions and answers. And I hope to see you next time. So I'm going to stop sharing, and that's what we'll do for the remaining 15 minutes. I'm here to answer any questions about something I said, or maybe something I had on there, but I forgot to mention. I'm here for any questions.
Wow, Mary Ellen, that was an excellent presentation. And I've got so many notes, and oh my gosh, it's just absolutely wonderful. I've learned so much. So thank you so much. So what are some of the questions that you guys have? Please feel free to unmute yourself or put your question in chat, however you'd like to do it. Okay. Well, if there are no further questions, thank you all so very much for joining us today. It's so good to see you guys, and Mary Ellen. I just cannot thank you enough for what you've provided us today. That really is such a wealth of information, and some of this is the first time I've heard of it. So it's been fantastic. So thanks so much. Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you again in our next series. We'll be sending information out in the coming days, so stay tuned.